Okay, Sean, I got a question for you.
Sure.
I was a Christian or believer, or whatever you'd like to call me, for about 30 years. Now, not only did I go to church and study the Bible, I read the entire thing from cover to cover. One thing that stood out to me is how it seemed God was almost, if you will, he was really too willing and too eager to kill people. He would kill for minor offenses, such as Lot's wife when she turned around and looked at the destruction of Sodom. And then he had 42 children killed for calling the prophet Elijah a baldhead. Now, of course, there are many instances of God killing indiscriminately, such as Noah's flood, or when he ordered the genocide of the Amalekites. Yeah. It all seems like murder was a knee-jerk reaction to God. His solution to his problems, or any problems that were going on, was death. Now, being a god, certainly he could deal with disobedience in ways other than killing. I mean, did Lot's wife really deserve to die simply because she turned and looked over her shoulder? Did his 42 kids deserve to be violently ripped apart for calling the prophet Elijah bald? So now, saying all this, how can you consider these things and look at God as a loving, forgiving God?
Is that your question?
Yes.
All right. So let's talk about the two instances here, Lot as well as Elijah, and you called them children or kids. That's based on a mistranslation. They were young adults. On Google.
That makes it all right.
Their age is irrelevant.
Yeah, okay.
They were kids. Their age is irrelevant. It's just I find people, when they bring this up, they make it sound like God is killing children. No,
he's just killing young adults. It's totally different. He's killing 14-year-olds. There are other instances in the Bible where he's killed children.
Okay, or even better, how about Noah's flood? How many bears? Please, one at a time. Let him answer this specific point about the bears and the children.
Okay, God's judgment, in any case, is always both an act of judgment. God is a loving God, but not to the exclusion of his righteous indignation against sin. So the idea that God is all loving to the exclusion of judgment, I mean, let's take a case where we would consider someone worthy of death. So we can just use people that are notoriously evil in our own times, like Adolf Hitler or something like that. These people, I think we all agree, are worthy of death, and we can understand God killing people like that, right? Every time God sent a prophet, he was calling Israel and the world to faith in God to save them from eternal damnation. So if there's this attitude in the nation of mocking God's prophets, if God didn't demonstrate that both he was on the side of the prophets, defending them, and making it very clear that if their message was rejected, that you're going to go to hell forever, yeah, God killed a few people to make a point for the sake of the entire world. Yeah, a few.
Yeah, I mean, there are two things. First of all, you would say that God knew all of this was going to happen exactly, and that's how he makes the predictions, the prophecies in the Bible, correct?
Yes, correct.
So really what God did is he actually made these children to call this guy Baldy such that they could be ripped up. He actually made the world sinful such that it could be destroyed by a flood. God certainly could do that.
Go on.
Sorry? Well, I mean, if God actually... What he said, Thunder, was that God did not make the world sinful.
You want to attribute all causation to God in every case. That's what you're saying.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is if the universe is deterministic and God actually knows the universe isn't deterministic,
no, it isn't.
Then how can God know what's going to happen?
Okay, so let's talk about necessity and probability. Tomorrow you're going to eat pancakes for breakfast, hypothetically. Let's say that's... You will do that. And God knows that you're going to do it. The question is this: does God necessarily know that you're going to eat pancakes tomorrow? Well, the answer to that is no, because you could eat eggs. We do know that.
Call him God. If he doesn't know the future, why call him God?
I didn't say he doesn't know the future. I'm saying I'm talking about how he knows the future. Does he know it in a way that he determines the future, or does he know or does he know the future some other way without being a direct cause of it? And what I'm arguing for is, by nature of the fact that probabilities exist, it is just as probable for you to eat pancakes as it is eggs. You know that that possibility exists. It therefore follows that God does not necessarily know that you would eat pancakes tomorrow, because that would exclude the possibility that you could eat eggs, but that possibility does exist. So God's knowledge of your future is not a necessary... Hold on, let me make my point. God's knowledge of your future is not a necessary part of his own nature, rather it is accidental, or it's simply not necessary. That's not to say he doesn't know it, but he doesn't know it in a way that determines your future.
If he knows what's going to happen, then he knows what I'm going to do.
Correct.
And if he knows what I'm going to do, what free choice did I have in the matter?
It's your free choice that God knows you so intimately that he knows when put in a situation based on your nature, your character, what you will freely choose. God knows what you will freely choose. So it's your choices that God knows.
So it's a deterministic universe, right? You don't really have any free choice whatsoever, because it is already determined. It is already predictable via some set of rules what you are going to do.
God, okay.
Can I hop in here for 1 second, Thunder, real fast? I wanted to, because actually I don't believe in the whole deterministic thing, and I've never found that argument valid. I'm actually slightly more inclined to agree with Sean in the sense that there's a difference between knowing what somebody will do and at the same time making them do it. I think that there's a difference there, just in principle.
Thank you.
But if I can, back to the whole killing 42 people thing, Sean, you believe that, that God is that he knows everything, right?
Absolutely.
And that God can do anything. Right.
Yes, yes and no. So, that might need to be clarified.
God, what could God not do?
The Bible says God cannot lie.
Oh, okay. So
he can't do something.
But either way, could God have made a world? Could God have made a world? Could God have made a world without sin?
He did make a world without sin.
Obviously, not very successfully. I mean, could he make a world that there would never be sin in?
This is called, you might want to look this up on Wikipedia, called trans-world depravity. That is to say, in any world where God creates free moral agents that are sufficiently free to choose that in any given world, people will freely choose to do evil. That's not an imperfection in God. Rather, it's not actually an imperfection at all. That is only to say that people's goodness is contingent upon their obedience to God. And in any world where there is a sufficient amount of freedom, there will eventually be someone who chooses to freely disobey God.
And there's no way that God could create a world where that wouldn't happen.
Okay, I'm going to answer your question by asking you a question. I am going to answer your question. Can God force you? Can God force you to freely choose something?
No, the Bible, yes, he hardens people's hearts and changes their minds and does all sorts of things.
You're right, he does, and I can explain that.
I was going to say no, he doesn't, because he doesn't exist, but go ahead.
Okay, the way you answered the question is correct. God cannot force you to freely choose something because that's inherently contradictory. It's illogical. If God...
Yes, of course, we have free will. We had no choice.
I'm not sure that we haven't just lost Sean. Can we just go back to the caller whilst we try and sort out Sean's connection?
Nope, Sean's back.
Oh, it was Sean back. Well, I'd like to go back to the caller. I'd like to go back to the caller if that's all right. Curmudgeon, would you like to come back on what you've heard so far?
Well, the thing is, Sean didn't address the problem with Lot's wife. I mean, sure, she disobeyed, but my goodness, does she deserve to be turned into a pillar of salt just because she turned around and looked?
It is such an interesting story, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because Lot's wife is actually referred to a few times in the New Testament as an example. Specifically, Lot was told to leave Sodom and Gomorrah, which is a picture of God's judgment upon a sinful society. So she looked back. Now, that doesn't mean she just turned around. It means she deeply desired to go back to that lifestyle, and she became a pillar of salt. Now, Jesus says that Christians are the salt of the earth. Salt means a preservative, as a purifier, as an irritator, all these sorts of things. She became a pillar of salt forever. She will always be a symbol of the judgment of God against those who turn back, who desire to live in their sin.